I haven't had everybody on collectively as East Films, but I've had each of one of you on individually since I've started. We have Jenni Trang. Can you say hello, Jenny?
Hello, I'm Jenny.
And we have Bao Nguyen,
Hi, everyone.
and we have Anderson Lay.
Hi, guys. Hi, everyone.
And this is part of our founding members at East Films. And today we're here to discuss all of the hate crimes that are happening in the United States in the last few months. Bao, I want to start with asking you, why is this all happening now?
It's a sort of a tough question to ask. I think since the events of Georgia, which happened just very recently, that I find that is sort of a point of maybe an inflection point for a lot of us, especially in the Asian American community, because all of the sort of seemingly there's obviously a lot of verbal harassment, but also physical harassment, especially against Asian American women and Asian elders. But having 6 Asian women being murdered is something I think we had at sort of the worst of in our imagination. We couldn't imagine that, right? At least I couldn't. I can't speak for everyone, but I should say that it's even though I say that in a way, I'm not surprised, sadly. Like in the darkest of the dark of my brain, like I'm not surprised by America in that way. And I think the African American community has gone through this many times before, and I don't know why I thought maybe the Asian American community would not go through it, but sadly we are. And I think it's the sort of a culmination of a lot of different things that's been starting since the very first arrival of the Chinese Americans building the railroads, right? And sort of the otherization of Asian Americans since we've been here, and boiling up through the Chinese Exclusion Act, through Yellow Peril, Japanese internment, list goes on in terms of the systemic ways that Americans have been treated in America, but also just culturally how we've been treated in media, on screen. Anderson can probably speak better about this than I can, but the fetishization, the emasculation, and the villainization of Asians in cinema, where we have hardly played the heroes, hardly played the leading roles. It's only been in the last few years that I think more multifaceted versions of ourselves have been seen on screen. And so what society sees on screen, it penetrates to how they think, how the attitudes are formed about a community, about a people, especially during a pandemic where we're, for the most part especially in the beginning of the pandemic, we were stuck inside watching television, watching whatever is on our screens. And if there aren't I emphasize multifaceted. I don't think that we should just have positive portrayals, because then that perpetuates the model minority myth of Asian Americans. For people who don't know what the model minority myth, it's basically a concept that was created in the 1960s, basically as a wedge created between what people saw as the upper class, like well-achieving Asian Americans as a minority group, to pit them against Black Americans and say, well, Asians are succeeding, they're a minority, why can't Blacks do the same thing? And obviously that myth has again sort of been relevant past the 60s, 70s, up until this day. So going back to my point, I think having multifaceted versions of ourselves that people can see on screen that people haven't been able to see, especially during a pandemic, and when you have a former president calling it the Kung Flu and the Wuhan virus, and calling China basically public enemy number one for America, that creates a sense of paranoia among many people who have, legitimately been affected by this pandemic. I try to think in an empathetic manner of like, what are the hardships that people have gone through where they feel like they've been attacked themselves, where they have to take it out on on another community, right? They're looking for an enemy, and I think that's human nature in a way. That people are looking for someone to blame, and because of all this otherization of the Asian American and blaming of the Asian American from the top, that's created a real sense of fear among our community. And I think that's sort of led up to, the horrific events in Atlanta. And we talk about this more about whether it's a hate crime or not, but, hate stems from a lot of different issues. It's not very clear cut. It's something that's buried, that's rooted in something.
Jenni, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, I was thinking that it's not like it's something that's been building, it's not like all of a sudden one day, boom, all of a sudden there's all this hate. Like just as I was saying, I think that our former president giving all the racists and all the prejudice that has already existed from lack of representation, from all kinds of things in the past, that like it's just he gave a lot of power to the people, the people with all these malicious thoughts, and then it became like okay to hate. It became like normal, and I think that, and then combined with the pandemic, I mean, it's a lot of things, but I think that all stems from hate of the other, and I think it's like a topic that we keep talking about over the years, and I think slowly we start thinking about it. But I think that it's great that people are coming together to talk about it, and if anything, to open dialogue, and it's really about that dialogue to start the conversation.
Yeah.
Can I just add on to that point? It's just, and what Anderson was saying too, it's not something that's happening now. It's something that is deeply rooted in America's creation. Its birth was based on annihilation of an entire group of Native Americans. And I love America. Let's not get me wrong about that. I came over, I'm grateful for America. But, I think the idea that we have to appreciate all aspects of America and not challenge it is very un-American in many ways. So when people say that, these acts are not American and they're not what we stand for, or they're un-American, I think that is doing a disservice to the work that a lot of grassroots activists and community activists are doing, right? Because they know the first part of this reckoning that's happening of America is acknowledgement that this is America. And you always have to accept that this is the reality of America. Of course, we're trying to build and aspire to a different America, but we also always have to recognize that the roots of America are built on violence.
Do you think that the American culture in general, or the white culture, is beginning to see that, or is beginning to acknowledge it?
I mean, I can't speak for white Americans. I think there is solidarity and coalitions being built. I think we get stuck in trying to think what all of America is thinking, and especially on the coast, right? And I don't know if the conversations that we're having today are the same conversations that are having in parts of America that I'm not so familiar with. I hope they are it's being had. But I can say among a lot of my white friends have reached out to me in the past few days, and I'm greatly appreciative of that. And they want to learn more about Asian American history, which is a new thing. But at the same time, like, how much of it is just a moment? How much is it fleeting?
Now, there also is people that are already wanting to make that move. I think it's about how do we reach the people that are the source of the hate.
Well, I think that even in our community, our Vietnamese community, I think there's a good chunk of people that don't believe that there really is a problem.
True.
There's no acknowledgement of it. I don't think that they realize that this is really going on. Like in Hawaii, Anderson, is there anything like this happening? Any violence?
like anti-Asian violence, or
Yeah.
you mean like just? I mean, I think every place. I mean, racism permeates everywhere, even in the Asian American kind of like kind of mecca that is Hawaii, right? That a lot of people deem it as like. There's always other, I mean, that's why intersectionality is such an important thing. There's always different facets of racism or classism or whatever, and it's I mean, even here in Hawaii, like there was a recent incident in the news on the island of Kauai. The police chief, who was white, who was just got the role. I mean, the position maybe a few months ago, sometime last year. He retired from the Vegas PD and moved to Kauai to become the police captain there. And like, apparently, there's like accusations of him being of anti-Asian sentiment. Of actually using racist slurs and in the workplace and whatnot. So he's being currently investigated now. I mean, like there's always, I think there's, I think there's always facets regarding that. I mean, going back to what happened to, the incident, tragedy or massacre basically in Georgia, is that it's no different from like George Floyd. It's like it's like you're basically America's clutching their pearls when there's always has to be someone has to die, and then there's always got to be some massacre to wake people up, And I think it's like, especially when it comes to what what happened in Georgia is, I mean, it's just there's a deeper conversation when it comes to kind of the Asians, even the Asian Americans as the perpetual other, deeply rooted in like the Chinese Exclusion Act and all that stuff. Like it's like the fetishization of Asian bodies, Asian women. I mean, that's all deeply rooted through mass media, and the fact that like Asian Americans are everyone's deemed I always feel that like no matter if you're black or brown or white, there's always this like treating Asians as a monolith, and I think it's like there's so many facets of Asian Americans, and the fact that yes, I mean the mono minority myth is a myth. Like it's definitely a myth, and then and intersectionality is something that is. I think it's like you have these like basically factions basically of people saying that intersectionality or critical race theory is just like basically just it's you're just making a mountain out of a molehill or something like that. That it's like, I mean, things are complicated. I think the portrayals of Asians, like and what have you, it's like it's not black and white, so to speak, right? And I think it's just the fact that even like what even before this, with the a lot of our Asian elders who are being attacked randomly, especially in Northern California, which is like kind of like like another predominantly Asian American area, like in Oakland, for example, right? It's like, and the fact that these you have to have Asian American kind of like celebrities and people in like in media to actually put a spotlight on this. You have to have like Daniel Wu and Daniel Day Kim, who are like actually pounding the pavement, like getting on all these news shows and what have you. Daniel Day Kim just actually spoke at the Congress, I think yesterday, about this. But like the fact that mainstream media isn't covering this, and this is something that's not like anywhere from Vincent Chin to like these are things that need to be discussed and taught in school. That's why I believe like the 1619 project is so important. But I mean the whole point is to not showcase, but actually look at America and the foundations of America, the ideals of America are worth fighting for, and unfortunately this the history and foundation of America is basically full with a trail of blood and death and massacre.
Yeah,
and I mean this is something that we need to learn, and kids need to be educated.
Why do you all think that the news media, the mainstream media, is not covering this?
I mean, they're covering it, but the way they're covering it now, it angers our community even more because it's perpetuating so many stereotypes still, and I've been watching the news just because I know how the news is going to cover it, and like how they have reframed the story, so it's more about this white boy who's troubled, who had a bad day, right?
He had a
And
bad day and a sex addiction. Again,
Yeah, sex addiction. That's new, man.
But then is it because the press is covering it maliciously with an intent to skew the story, or the subjects that they're covering, which is, I think whoever said all of that was the police chief that was being, he came up with these remarks, is the mainstream press sort of spotlighting the wrong people, the wrong voices, or they're really maliciously heading in a direction?
I don't know if it's malicious intent, but it's again systemic, right?
Yeah.
It goes back
to... it's unconscious bias through systemic racism.
I don't think it's unconscious bias. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, not malicious, just more like... I mean, like they don't...
You look at
a better way, they don't know
But
better.
I think that's, we've, as Asian Americans, we sort of like bite our tongue. Some of us do. There's many people who don't, but many of us do, because we're like, oh, it's not malicious, right? So then we don't want to speak up against it. But now we have to start dismantling the systems that create this unconscious bias, and that again perpetuate this otherization of us. I mean, the women who were murdered, some of the broadcasters didn't even pronounce their names correctly. And I mean, I haven't been catching up with the news, but I heard just recently, like, that this was a legitimate business, massage parlor. It was not what people assume when they hear Asian massage parlor. I think that already is just bad reporting, right? And that those assumptions, once someone hears it for the first time that's watching the news, it's just going to stick with them, and it's hard to sort of backtrack from these assumptions that are stated as almost fact by news media.
How do we dismantle this systemic approach that is happening?
Well, I think it starts from what Anderson was saying, education. I think that people, and the thing, I mean, this is to start way back, but I don't know, for me, even as a Vietnamese American, when I took my first Asian American studies class in college, it was like a huge eye opener for me. And I am Asian. I didn't know anything of that. And then after I took that class, then I realized that we didn't talk much about being Vietnamese American. And then I had to take another class that was about being Vietnamese American. But this is all because I wanted to learn more. But it should be something that's already ingrained, because it is part of the American history. But you just you would maybe hear about Chinese building railroads in kind of like, public education when you're growing up, So I think it just starts with like being kind of like erased and being not seen and being not like given voices. And, I mean, we always talk about representation. I think it starts from when we're little kids, So.
Yeah. I mean, it just, just to boil it, just to make it, if you want to, the simple answer, the black and white answer is basically we just need, just more portrayals of Asians in entertainment, in mass media. That's the whole point of what Peace is doing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's our mission, is to, not to I'm not the audience for like Bling Empire or House of Ho, but
it's like, I love Bling Empire.
But anyway,
and House of Ho.
Yeah, but anyway,
but it starts there.
No, but it's fine. You need to have again. The whole point is like you have to dismantle the model minority myth. I mean, Asians are multifaceted, just like any other group. And like to have like in a sense media, just media portrayals of different facets of Asians in media, in film and TV, and music, and what have you. It's like what. I mean, you have like what Randall Park is doing, or Aquafina, or directors like Justin Lin, James Wan. Like they're Sung Kang. They're really kind of like Ali Wong. They're just really kind of tying the pavement, and like really. At least you're seeing them more and more in mainstream media. No longer in the vestiges of kind of like the Asian American indie space, for example, right? And I think that if there is going to be a legitimate push for diversity, and I think there is, especially in Hollywood, then Asians got to have a seat at the table as well. And that you see that but it's not only about, not only in front of the camera, but also behind the camera. You have to have execs who are making decisions or what have you. The Stephen, you look at Stephen Yeun, like he's like, the first Asian American male to be nominated for an Oscar. That's kind of unheard. I mean, it's amazing, but it's also
in 93 years.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's like
that's crazy.
So I think and I think it's just like by doing that, you kind of engender like basically Asian Americans is not this invisible monolith, and we should not be quiet either. We should not be boxed into the stereotype of the model minority.
Yeah, I mean, it's like what Audre Lorde says, right? The feminist, she's like, the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house, right? So we have to build our own tools, just like Anders is saying, is like we're building our own production companies. And I think because people, I think if you think of it in a holistic way, storytelling is so important because storytelling, film, culture changes attitudes. You can't change policy without changing attitudes. You need movement from the people, from the public. People aren't just going to all of a sudden support gay rights, right? It's, this is as sort of self-congratulatory as I'll get on this call, but, the first Black president was on television before he was ever in reality. And so we have to create these imaginations through stories, right? Because people can see it as a story and then they imagine it for their own reality and their own future. And that's, again, I think,
it's like an emotional
yeah, they imagine, they see themselves and they're inspired to reach out to it, even if it's just a film. But, for us, when we see ourselves on screen, my first experience sort of being seen was Heaven and Earth, Oliver film, and it's directed by a white guy. But I remember watching it. It's probably one of the first films I ever watched in the movie theater. Yeah. I watched it with my parents, and I'd never seen them so enthralled watching anything in my life. How felt, how they saw their story on a big screen, and having your story valued means so much. And so that's imagine being able to see your past is very cathartic, but being able to see your future on screen, that's revolutionary.
Lately, I'm sorry, Jenny, go ahead.
Oh no, you can start with Lily first because I know that's Heaven and Earth related.
Yeah, Layli Hayslip has been on the show, and sitting with her.
Remind us who she is again.
Layli Hayslip is the writer of Heaven and Earth, and in Vietnamese, or actually the actual title of the book was When Heaven Meets Earth. But she talks about how all of this came from her mind and her vision of it. There was no representation when she got here in 1970. And she said, it has to be told. And it's so inspiring to hear her say, I'm going to put this into words. And here's a woman with no education, no structure around her, nothing to plant the seeds for her, if you will. She willed this story into reality. And to have Oliver Stone pick it, a white person pick this up, but it was something that was like, there was not a community around her, but she knew that this is something that the world needed to see. So we need to take that inspiration from somebody who definitely went, in 1970, understood. And I, like you, Bao, was moved very much by her story when I saw it.
Yeah, I hope we're a continuation of that spirit, right? I mean, that was, again, one of the first films I saw, and it definitely helped inspire me as a filmmaker. Sorry to interrupt you, Jenny.
No, that's okay. No, yeah, I mean, I agree. Like, I think of it as a Vietnamese American woman who, like, grew up as a very, I'm a very positive, bubbly, like, cute girl. I didn't really, like, experience, like, in your face racism, and I never really thought about it growing up. I sort of, like, was just really okay with myself and had a lot of friends. I was, like, popular. And then I remember when I went to the theater and my first experience seeing myself on screen was Better Luck Tomorrow. And just seeing, like, a film about Asian Americans, really not even about any culture, just about these kids that are just Asian doing their, cheating and living life and being crazy. And I felt really emotional, and I was really shocked by my own reaction, because it's not an emotional kind of film. It's like, like a kind of heisty kind of film. But I felt so touched, and I didn't realize how much it affected me. And I think that like you, same with you, Bao, when I started going to like community theater, and then when I started doing theater and we're doing Club of Noodles and working with other Vietnamese American artists, I realized that wow, we do have stories, and our stories mean something, and it's not just about, it just kind of like when you took that whole thing of just reach one person, I think that I wanted to, like, in my profession now, I just want to be able to reach that one person, for someone to be able to see themselves, on the screen or in the story, and it can affect them in ways that you can't imagine.
Definitely Heaven and Earth. When I first saw that, it was like something that was definitely unspoiled, like my parents' story and stuff like that. But I do find Oliver Stone very, very problematic. And the fact that, like, it's like, so the fact that, you have like a white male, telling our stories. I mean, I get it. It's the early 90s and what have you. There were not, there weren't Asian American directors per se who had the wherewithal. I'm not the wherewithal, but like had the capital, Hollywood capital, to make a film like that. You have to have Stone do that because he's the Vietnam guy, right? But but I'm just moving forward. I think it's like, we look at those, but like, I mean, the whole point is like, we're the generation to really make stories on our own terms.
What do you think is the immediate thing that people outside of media, regular Asian people in the United States, can do right now? Because we're all experiencing this pain, we're all experiencing hurt, we're going through such strong feelings. What can we do as a community and individuals?
I mean, I think everyone should we're in a grieving period, I think, of many of us, right? And I don't know if we should have to be forced to do anything. We're in a space that we have all different types of emotions, and we should sort of be able to feel those emotions as they pass through our body in so many ways. And I think maybe before this event, again, this massacre happened, there's ways to sort of galvanize things, but like maybe it's so fresh. We're talking on Thursday. It happened just 2 nights ago. I think it's unfair to expect people to do anything at this moment. I think let them settle on their thoughts. But I think just, yeah, I don't know. I don't always want to think that I have an answer to everything, so I really don't have that answer in a way.
What? Because of course you do, Bao. No, I think that right now it's about talking. It's about like the discussion and the dialogue, and really just, reaching out. And I think that, like, and no one's reached out to me, but I think because I'm in Vietnam and it's a different it's a different kind of space. But I think that but I know I've been trying to reach out, back home, because the news, for me, the news didn't hit me till like right away, because it wasn't really huge news here, and even in circles, it's just among my American, my fellow American friends that would talk about it, because here it's like, obviously in Vietnam it's like a monocultural country, and so they understand what racism is, but they don't really know it. They can't feel it. They just can understand it intellectually, right? So it's and when there's another, not to say that Vietnamese people are not racist, but they're kind of in a different way, and more, and
that's
and more
something
like wow.
Yeah, that's something that we should talk about too. Bao and I have talked about this on our walks, that this whole cộng đồng of Mỹ đen, right? We are racist. We, as a community, we're very racist towards the Black community. And then I think that there is dialogue. There's conversation in the Black community. It's like, wait a minute, why should we team up and back you up in this allyship when we have not gotten the support? I mean, what do we say to that? How do you even answer that at this point?
I mean, I think that's remnants of the model minority myth, right? And white supremacy. I agree with,
everyone kind of in a category.
If Black Americans tell me that, there's been anti-Blackness in the community and a lot of Asians haven't stood up, then I can't, I agree with them. I can speak for myself and say every moment that I feel like Black Americans are being attacked by the community, I try to stand up for it and try to defend, the Black community against those forms of racism. But it would be a lot, as you're saying. It's a fact that there's anti-Blackness in the community, and I think we're sort of dealing with it, and we have to deal with it in a very nuanced way, because obviously there's obviously white adjacency to Asian American culture that persists in Asian American society and communities, right? And I think that's what we have to dismantle first, because that is sort of the underlying issue here. Because we want to be seen as or many of us want to be seen successful in relation to white people. That way, it necessarily harms many communities of color, especially Black communities. So, these are questions that will never be answered, I don't think, in the history of America. But that's also the reason, America is always trying to find. It's not trying to form a perfect union; it's trying to form a more perfect union, right? We're always trying to improve, and that's the idea of America that I connect with, right? That we're grateful for what we have, but we always aspire for more. We always aspire for something better, because we know that in the ideals of America, a better America exists.
Jenni?
Oh, no, just real quickly, I think also to add on to that, I think in the context of us being Vietnamese American, that's another layer, because we have to deal with a generational issue. Because we're talking about the younger generation is more open-minded, and the older generation, because as immigrants, the Vietnamese American immigrants it's much later than Chinese American, Japanese American, Indian American, so on and so forth. And so we are also dealing with generational, the older people, and how their perceptions and their racial kind of identities, So it's really complex inside of that. Go ahead, Anderson.
Like in Hawaii, right? When you have the waves of immigrants who came to work for basically white, indentured servitude to whites, essentially, white missionaries, American businessmen who ran pineapple fields or sugar canes. It's a plantation mentality, right? There's always going to be at the very top. White patriarchy is always going to be at the very top, at the top of the pyramid, right? And then you're going to have the middle managers are going to be, they're brought in Portuguese, other Europeans to be the middle managers, and then you had all the waves of Asian immigrants who were and then you had the Japanese immigrants or the Korean immigrants, and then you had Chinese and Filipino, and then you have this whole pecking order. It's always, there's always racism everywhere. Even within the Asian American community, there's a pecking order, right? Southeast Asians, Vietnamese, we're the jungle Asians, right? Versus the East Asians who are maybe they're at the top, with the Japanese or Chinese or Korean and stuff like that. And I think it's
you can say that with a smirk. I am not. Yeah, I hate that stereotype so much. I hate it. I hate when I was a kid. No, it's real. It's a real thing.
Absolutely, no different here. Yeah, exactly. And then again, white patriarchy is so deeply rooted. It's messages of colonialism. It's all this trauma through through all of human history. Even in Asia, why are Americans usually who are white who live in Asia? Why are they called expats, not immigrants?
Yeah, who came up with that?
Versus brown or Asian, why who live in brown or yellow, whatever, who moved to the West? Why are they refugees or immigrants are not expats? And even there's a whole
political, right?
Well, no, even and there is deeply rooted when it comes to kind of the pecking order of the white patriarchy. Like when you when you do business in Asia, there's always that myth, but it's actually true of like renting like a white
Rent a
guy to
whitey.
be rent a white to be to pretend to be the CEO, and you're going on pitches and stuff like that. Business pitches and like and what have you. Like it's like I think it's like it's because they it's like it's like what we're those are all kind of part of the the like just the deeply rooted kind of like white patriarchy that kind of runs the world. So it's just like.
Sorry, I was gonna say. I mean, these are why these mythologies have been formed for so long about different civilizations and different races, and they permeate through today's society. Marlon James, this writer, he talks about why, like, and we talked about this, Ken, like the Arthurian legend and how that has made British seem like they're so civilized, right? But if no offense to British people, but they're not all civilized. It's definitely a part of a mythology. And if you create that same mythology about immigrants and refugees who come to America, then it's just going to, again, perpetuate itself over and over again. It's going to replicate itself unless someone is able to sort of stop it and create their own mythology. I think that's what, personally, I want to do, and I know we want to do as storytellers, is change the mythology, make our own mythology, reshift the narrative, reimagine the narratives for ourselves, where we are the center of the story rather than the white mainstream culture, because they're not. I mean, it's all a construct, right?
Yep. Bao, I that is why I do the Vietnamese podcast. It's really to uplift the Vietnamese experience throughout the world, to reshape the narrative. But I am getting fatigue from this Asian violence here in the US. I do kind of want to know if there's more of an immediate response to what's going on, instead of just going through our feelings and like a lot what you said earlier. Yeah, I get it. We're grieving, but at the same time, is there a more immediate thing that people can do? I don't mean like go out and be a vigilante or anything like that, but I mean
that's something you can do. I mean, to be honest, if people, I mean, there's a study that's saying post-pandemic there is going to be a rise of Asian American gangs.
I thought that too.
Yeah, and there's a study that they're seeing the roots of that, right? And who knows? I mean, that's a natural response to what's going on. And but I think there's so many activists and grassroots organizations that are doing the work. As much as we can support them in the work that they've been doing all along, that's very direct action. Asian Americans Advancing Justice, Chinese for Affirmative Action. These are all great organizations that people can support. I'm working with GoFundMe. Pivot's great. I'm working with GoFundMe. There's GoFundMe.com/AAPI, which we're trying to funnel. All the funnel's a bad word. Trying to be a hub for anyone who wants to donate monetarily to specific organizations that have been sort of vetted and that know exactly how to support these communities. So we're not experts in these communities in any way. We're an expert in our immediate community, but I'm not from Orange County. I'm not from Oakland. I can't say, oh, I'm going to go there and say I know based from reading a study what's the best for their community. There's people, we should be asking these questions of the community, right?
That's what I'm doing right now.
What do they need? Yeah. Well, you're asking us what we can do. We should be asking them what they need.
Oh, good way to put it. You're so eloquent, Bao. Exactly. What do you need?
I mean, you have this.
Also, I really like what you said about you can't change policy without changing attitude.
I mean, it's a tough battle when you're fighting against fake news and tribalism that's like, kind of risen through, Facebook algorithms and whatnot. Like it's like it's really tough when you have especially in the Vietnamese community, where I mean, it is a fact that as a group, there are a lot of conservative. I mean, like, a lot of Trump voters. I mean, they're
So
I mean,
many.
very cultish in the sense that or even like the fact that I mean, I don't want to even go into these flame wars online with other Vietnamese is like like it's like when you look at like um Asian like all these acts of anti-Asian violence against like Asian elders, and it's like a lot of it's predominantly done by young black and brown people, and then so like
Yeah.
it's like and then but like you look at and then you have like these kinds like, see, it's a Medan, it's a
Yeah.
black person, like it's like
My
they
family
hate
talks
us.
that way. They all talk that way. I
So
have
it's
good
like,
friends who talk that way. It's all like the BLM people. I'm like, no, you need to make a distinction. It's it's not BLM. And then they're like, no, it's Midan. And I'm like, oh my God, this is
I mean, I don't
not
care.
how.
It could be Medan. It could be like that's their excuse, or it could be Nexium, or it could be the Rothschilds, or like any conspiracy. It could be like Q,
Yeah.
like QAnon or whatever. They'll do whatever. It's like it's all within their kind of like I don't know what the I've listened to this NPR once. Like it's like this curated algorithm or something like that. That like once you click on these sites, and it's just everything that you want to hear is going to be kind of curated to you.
Closed loop.
Just, yeah.
But,
Yeah.
I mean, I think
loop.
we're. Sorry, go ahead. Finish your thought, Andrew.
No. I think so. I mean, I'm just saying it's like this. It's this constant battle against fake news, basically, right? And like to have like you have like these soapboxes. You have these like anyone who can become like the next, can be an Alex Jones or whatever, or like a Rush Limbaugh, within the community. It's like, they're going to have their like, rabid followers, and I think what Pivot is doing, what Pivot did, especially during the election, of like actually translating, actually having Vietnamese language like literature when it comes to all these other these basically these lies are perpetuated. These,
But Andy,
I think,
but there's a problem there too, though, because Pivot is a brand now, and when you talk to a conservative, like some guys in my family, when you talk to those guys, they see Pivot, and I've brought this up with some members of Pivot on the show. It's like they understand that there is also a branding of the word pivot. Now it's like, okay, well, those guys are the left, and they're not.
Well, I mean, they're literally say progressive in
exactly.
So.
Exactly. Progressive is like you might as well be a pink. Like you're pink. You're basically a communist or socialist.
Yeah, so it's like okay, well, you got Pivot. They're doing the translating work, and they're figuring this stuff out for the community. But then now it's like, well, you just put you put a filter and you put a brand up, and now the right won't go near it, no matter how well or how decently it's translated. So we have that issue now.
Well, we need like a Vietnamese NPR or something.
But even NPR's, left. A lot of people.
I mean, I think that you're also sort of making. If you look at studies of NPR, it's actually very moderate.
I agree.
But I mean, that's again, we're perpetuating like sort of stereotypes and sort of talking points of the right, saying NPR is liberal.
Yeah,
I agree. Like the New York Times is liberal.
Like yeah.
But I think we don't have a sort of objective truth that we're holding on to. But I think the problem is too that we're speaking in our echo chambers, obviously. In this group, and we're. I think Trump has, and divisiveness has always existed in politics. I think it's more than ever now. I used to think it wasn't back when, I studied politics as an undergraduate, and we'd always think like, oh, Trump, the Bush era was like really nasty, but our professors would say like, well, like Aaron Burr had a duel with Alexander Hamilton. We aren't seeing duels now. But given the events of January 6th, that statement doesn't ring true anymore. There's literally riots and insurrection. Mm-hmm. So it's very divisive. But I think, we should see people as human beings first and opinions second. And we're too busy seeing them as opinions first, right?
Yeah, exactly.
and it's not just the fault of the right. It's definitely I wouldn't say fault, but it's something that clouds all of our. It's just part of our discourse, and it's the discourse isn't civil anymore. We're not civil to each other, and because we people are respectfully angry, legitimately angry, especially Black Americans, because they've been sort of disenfranchised for so long that there's a mistrust, and many people have to earn back that trust toward the Black community. But at the same time, I think a lot of us are too busy, again, labeling and categorizing people as others, and that's what we're blaming them for doing to us as well. So how do we not sort of mirror that in a way?
Yeah, it's like I mean, it's like there's always I think Asian Americans as a group politically has always been short shrifted, and so I think it's like, and then I feel, I mean, I admit I'm a progressive, I'm a Democrat, but I have issues with a lot policies and with with in the Democratic Party and stuff like that. But at the same time, I feel like this is, I mean, I think we've crossed that bridge. There's a point of no return, and what happened in Georgia, what Stacey Abrams and all those amazing people have done with the New Georgia Project and all these other initiatives. It's like it's an ongoing battle, and I think it's an ongoing battle for the soul of America, for this country, and we just have to be vigilant. We have to be.
All right, all right, Joe Biden.
But I mean, like it's like
we have to keep talking.
Anderson Lay 2028. Just kidding.
Yeah. But like it's like, but I feel like it's like we have to be, I mean, politically engaged and always be vigilant and not be asleep at the wheel when it especially comes to the midterms and all that stuff. And I get it. There's a lot of like, especially during the protests last year, like when defending the police or or like even the political process, politicians, elections, they did nothing for for Black and brown people. I mean, I totally get that, and that's totally warranted. But I think it's like, as we have to as the GOP is gerrymandering and pushing these policies to limit voting rights for minorities and all that stuff. Like, we have to be vigilant, and it's a constant battle. And I think that's the only way we can do that, through allyship. And and I think it's like, and it's we have to do it all together. And I think we can't be asleep at the wheel.
I think sometimes when we really look back in the 60s and the 70s and the protests, I don't think things have gotten that bad today. I think in terms of getting out there and really pushing back, I don't think we've done it strong enough. I feel like as a group of citizens in the United States, I feel like we haven't been pushed to that point where there's like the Kent University in Ohio, where there's government actually killing people yet. And I just feel like we haven't done enough as a community, maybe an Asian American community, with this whole Stop the Hate. And I want to do more instead of just grieve at this point, but I don't know what more else to do, because I think it's still going to happen. And I think it's inevitable. It's going to keep going until we really...
Well, sorry, finish your thought. I'm sorry.
Until we really put our foot down in a way where it's got to be louder than it was in the 60s or 70s.
Well, I mean, you're pointing to a movement that was multicultural, right? A movement to stop a war. It was, we need allyship, we need solidarity. We can't do it.
Third World Coalition.
This is the first step, right? Other communities, and I should say that many communities have stood with us before, but I had a Republican friend email me today and asked me if I was okay, and said how sickening the events of Georgia were. And he's like a hardcore Republican. He voted for Trump. And so that's the sort of shift we need to see, that I think we're starting to see. But we need to sort of, I say we need to grieve, and in that grievance, there's, in the Jewish culture, lamentation is very much part of the Jewish culture, and I think being able to lament a bit gives us more power. From our grievances, we rise up stronger. If it feels like it's almost like a pathology where it's just like this is a cause of something and we're the effect, then there's not a movement that's being built. I think we're starting to build the foundations of things. So I think letting us sit with these emotions is important, because that's a very important step for Asian Americans, is to acknowledge their sort of mental health and do the self-care, right? So I don't think of grievance as a step back or as just twiddling your thumb. It's an important step. And I think the Black community knows this very well. They know, and the Jewish community. And so if we can learn from the communities of the past that have built movements that have created real social change, and I think that's the difference I see today.
Yeah, and then I think it's like, granted, we're all like we're all in quarantine and lockdown in the past year, almost year and a half now. I mean, over a year now. Like it's like I think it's like you have to be like just to really engage with just your community in general, like your neighborhood, for example. Like it's like I think I think again the political process. It's like I think it's like when it comes to elections, know who when you be involved with basically municipal elections, or even like school board elections, what have you. I think these are like gatekeepers or politicians that will affect your everyday life. Like it's like I think it's like just start from there first to be. I don't want to be all like kumbaya, but no, not basically love thy neighbor in a sense, but like just be engaged in who like people on your street or on your neighborhood. I think that's the only way to do that, to really kind of have that empathy. And like when it comes to and even political difference, like Bao says, like like it's like we're so tribal in the sense that you have Bao's Republican friend reaching out because I think it's like it has to take a massacre. And even like what happened in January 6th with the insurrection, like it's like I think we live in this like 24-hour news cycle where it's going to be forgotten like in like a few days. Like it's like how many school shootings have we had? Like it's always be forgotten. Like it's like and then this. Yeah, I mean you're right. This could be forgotten too. But it's like I just feel like we just have to not be quarantined or locked down, basically intellectually or emotionally. We just have to be, really engaged with the people around us.
I don't want to.
Feelings. We got to talk about our feelings. And say when it goes down to the emotions, like you said, it's like there's politics and of course and policies, of course, but go down to the nitty gritty, like what's happening around you. Like I agree. It's like it comes down to that heart. There's too much hate.
Many times when I'm doing a project or I'm aiming for a goal, I kind of try to visualize what the end game looks like, the final product looks like, right? What if we were to kind of visualize Asian American arriving? Like what does that look like in a few years? How would you judge that progress in your minds? Is there a clear goal, or is it the United States is we're constantly a work in progress?
I mean, I don't want to speak for Vietnamese necessarily, but from conversations that I have of Vietnamese people, there's not an aspiration for the country as a whole. Even though Vietnam is a very collective place, it's like, what's my aspiration for my family in this immediate time? And not, the society is a different sort of purview for them. And these are gross generalizations, I should say, but in terms of America, I was like, how about like the end of white supremacy? That's a good end goal for me.
It's just like when we used to, back in the day, we used to, the keyword was like, assimilation, right? And then it became acculturation. it's more like a salad bowl instead of a mixing bowl, right? So, or a melting pot, right? So that's the idea to live in harmony and understand each other's differences and the beauty of it as well. And you know, and ebb and flow, argue and not argue and get into fights and love and you know, like I think it's like but as long as the positive always outweighs the negative, right? And or if there is a negative, we learn from that. And I think it's kind of constantly learning and challenging ourselves and our friends and then strangers maybe as well. Kind of going out of the bubble, you know. I think that like it's easy to get to stay in a safe bubble where everybody is, you know, like you and woke and awesome. And then sometimes challenge yourself to go outside of that. You know, I think.
I mean, empires rise and fall. You know, I like it's like, you know, I feel like, you know, this is you know, I mean, we definitely this is a paradigm shift. Like, you know, the you know, like I think you know, white mainstream society, you know, especially, you know, perpetuated by, you know, I mean, I would say like not only neocons but neoliberals as well, is that, you know, they're afraid of this paradigm shift as the country becomes more brown, you know, and I think it's like, and that's why there's this like, I mean, that's why there's a rise of nationalism and conservative values, not only in America but around
Throughout the world.
you know,
Throughout
the world. Yeah, so that's like, you know, because of, you know, the you know, I mean, the world is getting smaller. You know, you have like, and you know, as like, you know, you know, the, you know, rise of superpowers, like, you know, you're looking at like, you know, the BRIC countries, for example, and have you like, it's like, you know, like, I mean, you know, I think there's always you know, for the U.S. or the West in general, there's always got to be a scapegoat or a straw, you know, just like or a straw man, you know, when it comes to kind of like the Cold War is a perfect example. Like, and I think it's like, you know, that, you know, there's a kind of a you know, like a want, a nostalgia to for the white picket fence, and then for like, you know, the 1950s, you know, and I think it's like, that, you know, they're using that imagery to kind of promote this kind of idyllic bygone era of America, this, you know, like this white utopia, so to speak, you know. So I think it's like, and you know, that's why I feel that this is you know, it's, you know, when I say empires rise and fall, like, you know, I think it's like, it's good that there's more multiculturalism, and like, I think we just can't erase it, you know, as Asian Americans, we have to constantly be, because of the model minority myth, because we're invisible, so to speak. I think, you know, I think we have to, what we're doing with East, what we're, you know, what you know, we have, like, when it comes to, you know, even like having Kamala Harris as our VP, you know, like it's like, having, you know, these, you know, as more Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders get more prominently seat at the table when it comes to entertainment or politics or, you know, in government or whatever, or even or corporations. I think that's what needs to happen when they have people, these people in power, to make the decisions for us to become more, you know, positive. You know, like when I can say positive portrayals in mainstream, it's like a multifaceted portrayal of that. So we're not visible anymore because, you know, and I think it's like, I think what we're doing at East is like, you know, we're just a small cog in kind of striving for that ideal.
I just want to touch upon Anderson's point too, like this, you know, the sort of idyllic American concept of success, I think, contaminated us as children, right? We always imagine like this nuclear family, white family with certain values, with certain traditions, we held that model up to our own family. I think that created a lot of trauma in many ways, and sort of unfair expectations of our parents and how our parents treated us, because we expected them to take us to the sports games and watch us go to prom and things like that. And those weren't their cultural norms, right? Those are the cultural norms that we
And then
were
we built
forced.
like a weird resentment that we don't understand those things, you know.
Exactly, and we had that expectations because of, for the most part, what we saw on television, right? And that's why I think the work we're trying to do is important at some level. It's all part of a larger picture of things that have to change in order for us to again reach that more perfect union. And trying to answer your question, Ken, I think for me, in the most sort of modest way, in sort of measure of success, metric of success is like, can we leave this country better than how we leave it for the next generation?
It's a great answer. It's a great answer.
Very good answer.
Yeah, I want to thank all three of you. If you have any closing statements, I would love to hear them.
Yeah, I think it's just like, I think, we have to take the time to grieve and like, and just like, I feel like, I mean, when the rise of Asian, I mean, is it the rise? I mean, is it a rise, or is it of Asian crime, or has it always been there? That's the thing, because we are much more in an interconnected world. I mean, yeah, definitely there's a rise, obviously, because of the the kind of racist overtures when it comes to blaming when it comes to the pandemic and what have you. But it's always been there. I think it's like, it's if it's not the pandemic, then it's like, it's like, it's what, the murder of Vincent Chin, because like Detroit car company like Detroit like factory workers were were afraid of like the yellow peril when it comes to Japanese companies taking over kind of like the car industry. Like it's like, or the white, or even like like the fetishization of Asian female bodies when it comes to so aside from the Chinese Exclusion Act, but I think there's like the Pass Act of 1863. I forget, when it was like a like a stoppage of like Asian female immigration to the U.S. because they're going to be shipped over because of more of a morality is like deemed as prostitutes. Like it's like, and so like like I think it's always been there, and I think I think we just have to like uh, my thing is that it always has to take a tragedy and then as a massacre to get gains people attention. And I think we just can't. This is like unfortunately an opportunity for us to not be left behind. And I think it's like, yeah, we have time to grieve, but we also have to be vocal about it. Like this is like, I mean if it if if Asian elders who are getting attacked and maimed and murdered is not enough, and if it takes like women to be shot and shot and massacred, then so be it. I mean, at least this cannot be forgotten. And I think it's like I think we have to keep the conversation going and really be more involved when it comes to, again, I guess the electoral process. And then this is not a perfect. America is the grand experiment, and I think it's like we were fortunate to have this political process, and I think that's one of the things that we can really kind of embrace and persevere to get that ideal.
There has to be. We sort of have an examine, as Anderson said. There's so much of our history that hasn't been examined, and we want to think that this anti-Asian racism is something new. And so when people have asked me, "Oh, how can I help?" I basically just hand them, read this Asian American history book, right? Because that's where it starts. You have to have a reckoning of the past in order to reshape the future. And we can't reshape this future unless we understand all the, historical violence of the past. And I think that those are sort of my last thoughts on things. And I want to thank you again, Ken, for giving us the space to speak about it and in this time, right? I think it's important to kind of get our impressions right after it all happened. And maybe we can, this is an ongoing conversation where I hope we can just out of this have more questions. The more questions I think we ask, the more we better understand ourselves.
I appreciate it, Bao. Jenny, you
I
want
mean,
to close? Oh, Andy.
Yeah, I just want to add to the fact that like when it comes to pop culture, that's like probably they always say film, cinema, film is like kind of is the most powerful medium, right? When it comes to that, I mean, we live in this like pop culture world where like I mean, you look at Marvel and DC and what have you, and like it's like Star Wars or what have you, like Harry Potter, and it's like like it's an
Soft
ongoing
power.
franchise. It's soft power, and then like the fact that it took me to watch Watchmen to learn about Black Wall Street, the massacre, and of that, of Black Wall Street. It's like this to watch a comic book show to to learn about this unknown history, like that's not being taught in schools. Like it's like so. I feel like it's like not positive portrayal, but more portrayals or proliferation of Asian media images is very very important. And then I mean, if it means that people need to learn about history and about culture through entertainment, then I mean that's why we're in it. That's why we're doing East.
Thank you, Anderson. Well, I want to thank all three of you. I'm sure we're going to pick this up again very soon. Hopefully not soon because of more violence, but soon because we just need to continue our dialogue. Thank you, all three of you again, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you for hosting.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Ken. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Annie. Thanks, Bob.
Everyone take care. Everyone take care.
All right.